Okay, before we dive into the music nerdverse, I just need to express how surprisingly deep and enjoyable I find Monster World 4 to be. Released late in the Sega Genesis lifespan, this title seems to be a perfect balance between classic 2D platforming and gorgeously executed visual and audio design. It has an awesome movement system that has a deeper swath of options than you'd expect, and there's this adorable and somewhat invincible bird friend who introduces an entire set of special moves, along with the healthy emotional side quest. And yeah, the music also happens to be dope. There are a couple songs with the 7/8 groove appearance, but the one that captivates me the most for sure is the Ice Pyramid theme. Besides generally being gorgeous like much of Monster World's overall design, this song contains 3 particular elements which I find pretty cool. The most prominent instrumental part of the whole tune might be this line played by the guitarish harp sort of tone. This is an ostinato, or a repeating figure, which sets the harmonic foundation for the main melody. By itself, this is already sort of a hypnotic, pretty melody with pitches outlining a D-flat major 7 harmony. However, from the very first measure, this line isn't presented by itself, it occurs over an E-flat in the bass. When we superimpose these notes over the key of E-flat, these are much more complex tensions. Often when we add tensions or notes that aren't standard chord tones like 1, 3, and 5, we're adding a sense of complexity and layering. In pop music, we don't often use tensions like this because it can sort of dampen the directness or brightness of a melody. But in the case of a game, where you're exploring a seemingly endless dungeon of puzzles, the concept kind of fits. Analyzed from a different perspective, this tune is in E-flat Dorian, or E-flat minor with a natural 6. Dorian just so happens to convey a very open and what I consider kind of an exploratory vibe, compared to other minor scales, which have the flat 6 resolving to a 5th. The main melody of the song also follows this pattern. It's primarily in D-flat, while the bass continues along in E-flat minor. In a previous episode, I gleefully shared a few moments in video game history where composers chose to craft their tune in an odd meter. So, admittedly, putting something in an odd meter isn't impressive entirely just in itself. However, to make it sound fluid and natural, this is what I think Jin Watanabe does very effectively here. In the previous odd meter video, I showcased an example of 7/8 which is very clearly organized between a group of 4/8 notes and a group of 3/8 notes. Here, though, we have a much more complex group. If we use 16th notes as a bass unit, this figure is comprised of little groups of 3s, basically copy and pasted throughout the whole measure. There is a lone group of 2 here, and because this moment isn't at the beginning or the end of a phrase, these figures go consecutively over the bar line, and you get kind of a disorienting effect. So, before we check out that bass line, I'd like to mention that I've officially launched a Patreon for the channel. At the time of this video, I am a freelance musician, and I would sincerely enjoy just putting more time and resources towards this silly and almost educational channel. In my quest to make content more regularly, however, I sometimes hit a wall when needing to take as many gigs as possible, and simply being unable to financially prioritize BitBlitz. Anyway, for the price of a boba tea, or like a charging block, you can have access to all of my extra content and be able to vote in future polls on video topics. And just a friendly reminder, if you're not in the position to help me out financially, I still love you, thank you for being here. So here we are at this bass line. There is something so impactful about it, but it's not like behind the beat or dissonant or anything particularly strange. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. I think this line slaps so hard specifically because it is much simpler than the other elements of the tune. These are just meticulously accented 8th notes climbing up the E-flat minor pentatonic scale, but they're so unexpected after having been preceded by tons of 16ths and offbeats. This creates a moment of contrast, which in my opinion just sounds filthy. And this is something that might not seem obvious at first, and especially to young musicians and people who are just starting to perform. But one thing that I've learned through years of performing is how important context is, and how important it is to be able to use contrast to make musical statements, rather than using busyness or more activity. If you're a rhythm section backing up a soloing musician, like a horn player, maybe a saxophone player, and that saxophone player is going completely in, playing 30-second notes and just shredding, it probably would be more impactful to the audience if you just stopped playing. I mean, in many cases, it is absolutely the correct move to blast out a run of 16th notes, but by the same token, there are also times when less activity actually makes the moment more intense. In the case of Monster World 4's dope bassline, these super clear 8th notes are just a nice contrast to the flurry of syncopation found in the rest of this section.